Alright, so now that we have those cubes out of the way, I'm just going to move on to the rest of the objects. Let's start with this rectangle box over here. Let's grab that, hit Z, hide everything else. Okay, and this is very similar to the cube, so we're going to use a pretty similar UV mapping technique. Actually, it's going to be exactly the same, but we'll do it again anyways. So I'm just going to center the pivot point on this. Looks a little whacked out there. Okay, so for this guy, let's convert to poly. Add our Unwrap Modifer. Okay, and as you can see, those are those green seams I was talking about that are automatically generated. Alright, so you can turn those off by hitting this button if you want, or you can just delete that and clear the UVs, and then just throw the modifier back on there. Okay, that'll get rid of them. Anyways, okay, so for this we can do the same thing as we did in the other one. Open up the edit window, grab our polygons, go up to mapping, flat mapping, hit OK, down to edge, turn off sync element, and then you can just quickly, stitch this back together if you want. However you want to do it, it doesn't really matter. Okay, like that. And then just line that up in your grid, and your UVs are good. Okay, so we have no distortion on this piece as well. Alright, let's just actually clone this for a second. Just going to shift drag this over as a copy. Let's get rid of the other one. Okay, and we'll just do this a different way on this one, just to show you a couple other features. I'm just going to delete that, clear the UVs, and add another unwrap, and we'll just put our gray material back on there. So if you do want to cut some seams in, we have the edge selection that we can turn into a pelt seam, and if you don't want to do it that way, you also have some other options here. Okay, we can do a point-to-point seam. Okay, so we click this, and we go over and click on a vertex in the viewport here. It's going to give us this dotted line, and this will let you just go between sets of verts, creating kind of a seam edge. Okay, so if I go up and click on this vert here, and then right click, you can see that made that a mapping seam. So you can just pretty much follow around the edges and cut the seams in wherever you want. Also cut it this way, and maybe the same cut on the other side, just up, across, and down, and then right click to end it. And with this layout, which is exactly the same as the first cube, we can just grab a polygon, expand it, and just unfold the mapping here. Okay, unfold mapping, okay. Alright, and obviously this is an ideal layout because it's so long. So if you want to change the way that you have it mapped, let's just look at that right now. I'm just going to turn off synced element here and go to polygon so we can select individual polys. Okay, and let's grab this one right here, and we'll actually right click and go break. Okay, and that's going to separate that back out. So if we go to move, we can just move that around. It's no longer attached there. So if we wanted to change the position, say attach it to this one, we can easily do that by just going to edge, selecting the edge there, and stitching it back together. Okay, and I'll explain some of these features a little bit more in the second part. I'm just going to go pretty quick on the first section here. We have good UVs there too as well. Okay, so that's pretty much how you'd want to tackle really simple box shapes. All right, let's unhide everything else. And we'll move on to some of these other objects here. Let's maybe take on the cylinder. Let's grab that, hide everything else. And a cylinder is also a very easy thing to unwrap. Let's put it clear on and convert it to editable poly. And we have a couple options here as well. Let's put an unwrap on. We could use automatic mapping to flatten it out, but let's maybe do it a different way. Let's go to edge again. All right, I'm going to turn off ignore back facing down here by clicking this button. And we'll just grab all the edges here. Okay, and then I'm going to go into the front or left view. Turn off my grid here with G. I'm just going to hold down Alt and deselect all the center edges so we have the edges around the top and bottom selected here. And we can convert those to a seam by hitting this button. Okay. And now that'll let us planar map the top and bottom, but we also need to kind of unfold the sides here. Okay, and the way that we'll do that is just by making one seam from the top to bottom. And so if we grab an edge, say here, we can go over here and hit this button here, which will loop it. Okay, so it goes down to the bottom. And if we hit that and create a seam out of that, that's really all we need to do to unfold this properly. Okay, so let's maybe go into Polygon. I'm just going to grab the top polygon. Okay, we want to have this as a planar map, so I'm just going to go down and hit this button here, which is quick planar map. All right, so that's going to straight map that down. Do the same on the bottom, quick planar map that one. Okay, for the sides, we actually want to unfold them. So we can do that a couple of ways. If we grab a polygon there and expand it, so we have all the polygons around it selected, we could use either Pelt Mapping or cylindrical mapping, etc. Let's do it with cylindrical mapping. I'm just going to click this on, okay? And it's a little hard to see here, but there's a gizmo fitted around the model here. Let me just turn that off. You can see it, these yellow lines here. Okay, that's a cylindrical shape, and let me just change the axis here so we can see it. Okay, there it is there. So that's the way that the mapping is going to try to unfold or flatten out the model. Okay, and obviously you want to have it straight up and down. We don't want it side to side. Okay, so we can hit Z here. And we can also hit the fit option if you see it sticking up higher than it needs to be or shorter than it needs to be. We look pretty good here. It's right to the top and bottom, so we'll just hit fit anyways. And then we'll turn off the cylindrical option here and open up the UV editor. And you can see that it's kind of flattened out those side polygons for us here from top to bottom. Okay, we also have the two faces. All right, and sometimes when you do the cylindrical map, you'll get a couple of broken seams here. You can see right here, these green lines, which means that we have a broken seam here, which means these verts are separate. And if I pull them apart, you can see that they're actually not welded together. All right, so if that happens to you, just grab all the outside verts here, which are the broken ones, and just hit Control W to weld those. Okay, and now we just have the seam around the outside, which is what we want. You don't want to have any green seams running through any of the center sections. Okay, so let's maybe just move this out of the way for a second. We'll put our checker material on here, and we'll see that the sides is squashed down. Okay, like that. And the reason for that is because these polygons here in the unwrap are square, and obviously if you were to unroll or unfold the side of the cylinder, it would be more of a rectangle shape than a square. Okay, so what we need to do is stretch it out a bit, and there's a couple ways we could do that. We could do that by selecting the polygons and then using the freeform mode here to kind of drag them around until we see them go square in the viewport by just dragging on the corner and adjusting that until we kind of even them out. Okay, like more like that. All right, I'm just gonna do that for a second. Another option is just use relax. So if we go up to options, or tools, sorry, down to relax, we'll get an option to relax this mesh here in the unwrap window. Okay, so I usually like to use face angles rather than edge angles, and you can use either one. Sometimes edge angles will kind of twist things on you, but face angles is usually a good option. Let's just take the amount up to 1 here, and we'll just start relax. Okay, you can see that immediately flatten that out into the proper proportion, and you can see we have square checkers here in the viewport. Right, and you'll notice if you go up on top, the checkers on the top and the bottom are much smaller than the checkers on the side, and we want those to be even or as even as possible so that they get the same number of resolution from our texture. So if you're using the new version of Max, you can just grab all these pieces and hit this button down here, which is rescale elements. If we hit that, it's going to put those 3 chunks into the proper proportion to each other, which is going to give us a square checker or an even checker over the whole model. Okay, if you don't have that option, you'll just manually need to scale some of the elements until you can kind of match them up. Okay, so like if say this is really small and you have giant checkers like that and you want to match them to the other piece of the model, you just scale this up until you see them get a little closer in size. Okay, so they're more even, and that's a really important step. Make sure that you do that on all your models. Okay, and if you don't, if you have them really out of whack, so you have ones like this, the texture on the side of the cylinder is going to be much higher than the top. Okay, so the top's probably going to look blurry and the sides will look really crisp. Okay, so you want to make sure that they're even so that it looks uniform. So just try to match those checker sizes. All right, and once we're done with that, if you want to, you could stitch those caps back on by just selecting an edge somewhere along the top. Okay, and just hitting stitch and stitch. Okay, and kind of an unfortunate layout there, but that's fine. Let's just close that up. All right, so that's how you map a cylinder using that technique. Let's unhide all. And let's maybe just do another one here. Just going to clone this over as a copy. let's get rid of the UVs, clear the UVs, and we'll just put our gray shader back on there. Okay, and you can also turn those damn selection brackets off with J. There's a glitch in Max 2012 where they'll come back all the time, and it's super annoying, so you can just hit J to get rid of those. Okay, so let's look at another way to map this cylinder. We'll put on another unwrap, and let's maybe use point-to-point seam here to kind of cut this around. I'm just going to go up and select that, and we'll just click on invert here, and we'll just kind of skip over to the other side here and click, and you can see that's cutting an edge as we move along. And you don't have to go vert by vert, you can skip a chunk if you want. Sometimes it'll kind of go off of where you want it to go, but if that happens, just hit Control Z and just redo it. Okay, so we'll just cut that around the top, and we'll do the same cut on the bottom. All right, so just click on invert, go over to the other side, and kind of just trace it around, and then right click to end. Okay, and we'll also cut from the top to the bottom here, just following one of these edges. And let's go to Polygon. We'll just planar map the top and bottom polys again. Okay, and for the sides here, I'm actually going to do a pelt on it. All right, so let's grab one of the polygons, we'll expand it. Okay, and then I'll fill it up to these seams here, so we should have all the sides selected. And let's go over and hit the pelt button, which is up here. Okay, that's going to open up the pelt dialog here, and you can see we have a stretcher here with some kind of strings attached to some of these verts here, and that's actually going to pull the mesh out. Okay, so we'll hit start pelt here. Okay, and you can see that stretched it out and kind of flattened it out. So it's going to hit commit to that. All right, and that's very similar to what we got with the cylindrical map. It's a little more in proportion, and now that we have it stretched out like this, we can actually just relax it. Okay, so we can go to relax, crank that back up to 1, and we'll try face angles and hit relax. Okay, and you can see that's flattened back out. And pelt mapping is more intended for organic stuff, or say characters, but you can really use it on anything, and lots of times I just do everything with pelt mapping. I just find it's a really good workflow, so whatever you want to do, it's fine. Okay, so now that we have that, we can just straighten it out, and we'll just space these out a little bit more, and we'll rescale them, and we pretty much have a proper layout here. Okay, so you don't really need to do much to it. I'll just show you another feature that's really cool here in Max 2012. If you have twisted UVs like this, and you want to straighten it out, they've added this reshape button up here for straighten selection. So you just click that, and it'll immediately straighten it out on X and Y for you, which is really cool. It saves you trying to tediously rotate pieces. Okay, so that's a really handy feature. And also, before we close this out, we want to make sure that everything is fit into the 0 to 1 grid here. All right, so just move this over, grab all 3 pieces, and we'll just scale them down and just park them in here somewhere. It doesn't matter where they are as long as they're not sticking out. Okay, and we'll close that. And then if we apply our checker here, we'll have a proper UV map on it. So that's one way to tackle cylinders. Let's get out of this for a second. All right, so I know that took a little bit of time. I'm just going to speed it up a little bit more here. Let's take on maybe this cone. Okay, and this is kind of a weird shape, and because of the taper, it can give you a little bit of a problem with mapping. So let's look at how to do this one. It's still pretty simple. Whoops. Okay, so let's clear the UVs and put an unwrap on. And usually when I map something like this, I pretty much approach it in the exact same way as I would a cylinder. And the only exception would be that if you have a bunch of detail like cut in here or something, like a spindle of a chair or whatever, you need to do it a different way. But if the sides are straight like this, we can actually map it really simple. Alright, so let's go over to edge maybe. Alright, I'm just going to drag right through this. Let's turn off the going back facing first. Drag through these edges here. I'm just going to hold down Alt and deselect the side ones. So we have the top selected. Turn that into a seam. We'll do the same thing on the bottom here. Okay. Turn that one into a seam. And because it's pretty much a cylinder here, we can just actually do it exactly the same way. Alright, so grab those edges up the side there and we'll just split that. Okay, so now we have a seam around the bottom, around the top, and one down the side here. And let's go over and we'll just planar map the top. again, and the bottom. Whoops, what the hell am I doing? Let's plane them out that guy. And for the sides here, we'll just maybe do another pelt here. So just grab those polygons on the sides and open up pelt. Okay, and if you just let that pull out for a second, hit commit. Let's rotate this around a bit. And let's space this out. Okay, so obviously this is all twisted here. If you put the checker on, you're going to see it's completely distorted. Okay, so this is not the way you want to leave it. You can see it's all stretched out there. Alright, so we're going to need to straighten this out, and the best way to do that is with relax, as I mentioned on the cylinder. Okay, so up to tools, down to relax, and we'll just hit start relax here. Okay, you can see that kind of fix the shape there and put it more into the proportion of the actual model, which is what we want. Okay, you always want your UV layout to kind of reflect the shape of the polygons on your actual model, just to make sure you have no distortion. Okay, you can see those checkers are square there in the background, and they're twisted, but that's just because this is twisted on the layout here. If we were to move this around, it would change on the model. Okay, that's not a big deal. There's nothing wrong with the UVs, it's just the way they're laid out. And we also want to put those into proportion. So let's hit that button. Close that for a second, and we'll just move these apart. Okay, and you can really do this any way you want. If you want to just park that little top cap in there, you can maybe put the bottom one under here. Or if you want to, you can just stitch those back on somewhere, depending on how you want your layout to be. Okay, so just stitch that in there. Okay, now it's one piece, and you can freely move it around and lay it out wherever you want. I'm just going to scale that down and park it over here. Okay, and we now have a good UV map on this cylinder. So very, very similar to the cylinder. Okay, so let's tackle some of these other objects here. Let's maybe do this Torus. Okay, and this is another weird one. Let's hide everything else. There's a couple ways you can do this. Let's get the UV on there again. In most cases, if you're doing like a, like a chain link or something like that, which is probably what you'd use this for, lots of times I'll just actually cut it in half and just kind of pelt map the top and bottom. So let's go into edge. I'm just going to grab an edge here on the side in the middle and loop that. Okay, so it's all the way around, and we'll convert that to a seam. Okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing on the inside edge in the center, loop that, and convert that to a seam. Okay, so we have those edges going around, and pretty much we can just do a direct planar map from the top and the bottom here. We'll have a little distortion on the sides, but usually that's not very noticeable, and I'll show you another way to map it in a second. Alright, so let's go over to Polygon, select a poly on the top here and expand it. Okay, now just select the top polygons up to that seam that we cut around. Okay, so we could do a planar map here by just hitting planar map. And if we go underneath, click one of those, expand it, and we can planar map the bottom, or we could even pelt map the bottom. So I'm going to hit pelt and start pelt. Okay, and you can see that looks a little screwed up here, but that's okay. It's still pulled it out, so let's hit commit, and we'll just fix that with the relax. Okay, so we have the planar map version and the pelt map version here of each half. Alright, so we'll go grab this one first. Let's go up to tools and relax, and we'll crank this back up and just relax it down. Okay, and that's just gonna fix as much of the distortion as it can. On this guy here, we'll just relax it. Okay, and you can see it's kind of twisted up there. Let's change this to edge angles instead of face angles, and you can see what that did. Okay, so we kind of screwed it up here. Let's see if we can fix it. Let's just go over here and hit planar map, and we'll just planar map it. I'm not really sure why that twisted up like that. Usually it's fine, and we usually end up with a similar result, but anyways, we now have that flattened out and relaxed, and we'll just make sure that they're in the proper proportion by hitting the rescale option. Okay, and if you want to, you can actually just do the same thing here and just stitch one of the edges together and scale that down. Okay, so that's one way to do it. It's not really the best. We're going to have some distortion here on the checker when we put this on. Let's just chuck that in there. And you can see overall it's pretty good, but we have a little bit of twisting here. You can see those are a little bit distorted around the edges. Okay, and that's just because it's directly projecting down onto it. Okay, so another way to do that, let's just clone this guy as a copy. We'll get rid of this guy. And let's strip the mapping off this one. So another clear, back to edit poly, put our gray shader back on it, and another unwrap. Okay, so that's not the best option. Another way you can do it, let's go to edge. And this time we're just going to select the center inside edge, okay, and loop it. Convert that to a seam. And instead of doing the outside center one, we're actually just going to do one this way. Okay, so I'm just going to grab this edge here in the back, loop it, and convert it to a seam. Okay, so we have a seam around the inside, and we also have a seam around it this way. Okay, now we'll go over to Polygon, grab a face, and expand it, and that should fill the entire thing. So what we'll do here is actually go up to Pelt, open this up, hit Start Pelt here, and just wait for it to pull out. You can hit it a couple times if you need to, and hit Commit. Okay, and it looks like a mess here, but it's actually fine. We can straighten it out. Okay, so I'm just going to rotate it side to side and relax it down. Okay, and relax should be your best friend whenever you're UV mapping. It'll pretty much fix most of your problems. There's no reason to try to manually tweak the verts and stuff if you can just hit the button and have it do it for you. Okay, so always remember to relax them down, and that'll really help on the distortion. Okay, so same settings here. Hit Start Relax. Okay, you can see that's pulling out here. It looks like we have a little bit of a twist there in the center. Okay, so if that happens, you can try another technique by selecting one of the other options. So I'm going to try Edge. Okay, and you can see that took care of the twist. All right, so we have it pretty much straightened out. You'll notice that the ends are feathered out. Okay, and that's always an issue when you do it this way. Let's just apply our checker here so we can see what's going on. Okay, so overall that looks pretty good. Right, we have pretty much square checkers. It's following it the right way. Over here at the ends though, you can see that feathered out on the UVs, and that's causing a little bit of distortion around here. Okay, and if you're going to be doing a really close-up render or something of something like this, you're going to need to fix that. All right, and you can do that by scaling them down, so it's a little bit more in proportion, so they're not so bowed out here. Okay. And I'm yet to find a really good way to map something like this with absolutely no distortion. You can't just straighten it out by hitting this option because it looks all perfect in here, but as you can see in the background there, it's not right at all. And if we were to scale this up, we're still going to end up with some distortion. Okay. And the reason for that is because the polygons in here are completely rectangle shaped, and on the outside of the model that's the way they are, but on the inside you can see they're not rectangles. These ones up here are more of a rectangle shape, and as it goes down to the center they get a little more narrow until you pretty much have a square polygon here. Okay, and we don't have any square polygons on our UVs, and that's what's giving us this distortion here, this squashing. Okay, so that's kind of something that you'll have to just work with until you can minimize it as much as possible. But for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just actually going to do relax like we had it, and we'll just leave it like that. Okay, and that's still easy to paint on in Photoshop, and you probably really won't notice the distortion too much, depending on how close your camera is to it. Okay, so that's one option to do these, and you won't have to map stuff like this very often. You could also break it up into more chunks if you want. You could cut some seams and kind of quarter it up, or even break it in half and unfold it. And the more seams you have and the more small pieces, the easier it'll be to flatten out. If you want to do it in one chunk like this, you're definitely going to have to work to get the distortion out. Alright, so that's kind of a downside on there. Let's just move this over and park it up here. Okay, and we'll just move on maybe to the tube here next.